Contamination, nasty one. Nasty, nasty, nasty. This is the biggest single issue that we're sort of coming into in the current realm of development, because we're starting to do brownfield sites. We're going into former industrial land that was industrial 60 years ago. Even land subdivision going out into farming land where market gardens and stuff like that were. That's a real problem because of the pesticides and herbicides that they used to use back then. So this is a major, major issue, and you need to have a very good environmental consultant work with you. A project that I did a number of years ago for a client. So this was a large-scale former glass-making facility. The client had a budget of $1.3 million to remove a whole heap of contamination from this old site. I suggested they were about $1 million short. Having read it, I'm no expert at the cost, but I just read it and I said, oh man, you know, I can't see how it's going to be 1.3. I reckon it should be 2.3. And what we actually ended up spending was 3.4. So in the ground, when you're talking about either an environmental test or a geotechnical investigation, when they drill a hole in the ground, all they can tell you is what's in that hole. 100 millimetres away from that hole may be the nastiest piece of, you know, in the world, but they can only tell you what's in that hole. So when you dig a hole in the ground, geotechnical is different. You know, we know if we drill a series of holes, we can sort of get a general idea of across the site between this hole and that hole, where the rock layers are and the different clays and all that sort of stuff. It's easier to determine, but when it's environmental contamination, no idea. We've got absolutely no idea what's outside of the hole that they drill. So this is the biggest single issue that we face. Environmental, flora. So we've got the birds and the bees, right, the flowers and the trees, right? These things, you'll be amazed. So doing an industrial development many years ago, we're right to go. We're getting our flora consultant comes along and walking through the site, and we've got, on the perimeter, we've got some endangered species around the outside of the site. The site had been cleared except for one tree. So we're getting the flora consultant in just to have a look at that tree. So walking on the site, we go up to that tree and they go, oh, well, this is just a XYZ, it's not a problem. And they look down and they go, oh, they're lovely little pink flowers. I wonder what they are. And this is a threatened species of something or other. All right? The tiny little pink flowers, oh my God. So $100,000 later, we actually had to transplant them. So one of those machines where they digs out a clump of dirt, well, we actually had to go and transplant these things on site to be able to utilise the property. So just, you know, oh my God. If we couldn't transplant them, then there was a 30,000 square metre industrial building that could not have been developed. All right? It's unbelievable, unbelievable. So you've got to be very aware of what these things can do to you. Heritage. So heritage, you have your Aboriginal heritage as native heritage, but under general heritage, you've got European heritage. There is also landscape heritage, which I never even contemplated, because another site that we were doing had a whole series of trees that had been planted as windrows to stop wind, because the land had used to be used as a citrus orchard, so lemons and oranges. And in that particular area, the lemons and the orcharding, right, was something that no longer is done in that land. It's now just grazing land. But historically, that was very important for the establishment of that region. So I would have thought that the citrus would have been the issue, the orchards would have been the issues. No, because these row of trees were planted to protect the orchards. So they were significant. And I couldn't believe that these bunch of old pine trees that were starting to fall down because they were beyond their normal life, no, sorry, can't do anything about it. So after much negotiation with the Heritage Victoria, we were allowed to remove these trees as long as, when we recreated our development, we had windrows of trees up either side of every road within the facility to, be respectful of what it was in the past. On that same site, Aboriginal heritage, it was a 300 hectare land subdivision that we were doing. This is massive. In the soil, we did 42 test pits with the local Aboriginal communities, and we found that 85% of those test pits that we did had Aboriginal relics in them, and all in the top half metre of soil. So what was required, because it was sandy, a very sandy soil, so the whole site was deemed to be an Aboriginal site. We could not remove any of that topsoil from site unless we sieved everything. So you can imagine 300 hectares of land, half a metre deep, had to be sieved to find all these artefacts. And we've just gone, we can't do that. The volume and the time and the cost of doing that was absolutely ridiculous. So we actually found a way around it. Again, we negotiated with both the local Aboriginal community and with I can't remember the department, the Aboriginal Affairs Department, but we negotiated with both parties to get an approval. What we ended up doing is keeping all of that material on site, but it was mounded into landscape mounds around the site. So it was quite a difficult scenario. So and the cost, just massive. So when it comes to any of these heritage items, you can be looking at a parcel of land and thinking, beautiful grazing land, yeah, we'll just be able to go plonk, plonk, plonk. No. You never know what's in the soil. So from a heritage perspective, we also had the remnants of a timber cottage that we couldn't touch. The timber cottage had rotten and gone. It was the 1800s, but the stone foundation that they built off was still sitting there, and we weren't allowed to touch that. So we had to actually work around that. So